welcome to another edition of Film Club, the show where we sit down and review movies, and I tell you if they get 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb down, or 2 thumbs down. You know, it is what it is. Today, we are going to be going through, as we go through Horror Fest month here, we talk about different horror movies that I've watched recently. I visited a 1995 or 94, I think it was filmed in 94, it was released in 95, John Carpenter horror flick. I actually watched this last night, and I've not seen all of John Carpenter's movies, and there's actually some that you'd be surprised that I haven't seen. This is one that I had never seen before, and in the kind of John Carpenter is kind of the director I'm following right now for Horror Fest. You're going to see a lot of film reviews on his work. Now, this in particular is one of his movies I haven't seen, and I was looking forward to watching it. Let it always be said that John Carpenter is and always will be a master of his craft. He's a phenomenal director, and sometimes he does put out duds. Sometimes he's made some pretty shitty movies that you won't like, you know. I don't think anybody's going to stand up here and tell you that John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars is a good movie, but in the 80s and in the 90s, he made some pretty excellent horror flicks. This one in particular is one that he did not write. It was written by someone else, but he did direct it, and that is In the Mouth of Madness. This is an excellent flick that I didn't really know much about other than I knew that it starred Sam Neill. The film stars Sam Neill. He's an insurance investigator. His name is John Trent. He's a very interesting character. So the point of this movie is they're trying to find out if this author has committed insurance fraud. Author's name is Sutter Kane. So what this film boils down to is he and another insurance investigator are looking for what's known as the fictional town of Hobbs End, which Sam Neill's character believes that it's a real town, and they go to visit it. But that's not how this film starts. The film starts with Sam Neill's character being admitted to a psych ward in a mental institution, and a doctor comes in and he explains his entire story to this doctor. So it already has kind of a wraparound story within a story. And what makes this film unique and interesting over most horror movies is that it has a twist ending. The twist ending is really good, and we'll get to that. But it was kind of one of the last great, at least for me, it feels like one of the last great horror flicks that really incorporated practical effects and not cheesy CGI, which a lot of horror film directors after about like 96, 97 started using those effects. And those effects, if you watch some of those late 90 horror movies, just look absolutely dreadful when you watch them today. That's not the case with In the Mouth of Madness. All these special effects look absolutely incredible, and they're fun to watch. This is a dark and twisted movie. It has a very H.P. Lovecraft vibe to it. I really enjoyed it from beginning to end. If I have one complaint about this film, is that it has kind of a slow start to it. You obviously get the big buildup of him being in the mental institution and starting his story. I would say the first 15 to 20 minutes of this film are kind of slow moving until they go on their car trip to get there, and through a series of bizarre events during this car ride, they arrive at the actual fictional town of Hobbs End, which turns out to be a real town, but we'll get to that here in a second. So there's some really interesting performances in this movie. You know, if you're familiar with actress Frances Bay, who I personally know her as the grandma in Happy Gilmore. I mean, who doesn't? Who hasn't watched Happy Gilmore? Who doesn't love Happy Gilmore? What a great, awesome comedy. And here, she was used in a lot, like this woman had so much work in the late 80s and early 90s, if you think about it. One of the best that she's done, obviously, besides Happy Gilmore, she's on Twin Peaks. She was a pivotal role in Twin Peaks and in the film Fire Walk With Me. And here, she plays an interesting character, and she plays a character that's one of the characters that the author Sutter Kane has come up with. So this flick involves Sam Neill's character going through this character Sutter Kane's kind of world and all these characters he has created through these books, and it's really interesting. Her character is supposed to be a devious old woman who actually legitimately kills and chops up her husband into coleslaw, and when he says it, I was like, oh, that's, you know, kind of whatever. No, that's the thing that happens, and it's dark, it's a twisted movie, it's violent. It's not overly, like, I wouldn't say it's the most violent movie I've ever watched, and it's kind of tame when you watch it today in comparison to probably if you went to the theater in 1995 and watched this movie, it probably would have blown your mind. So, but I enjoyed it from beginning to end, and it spirals out of control, and it really lives up to the name In the Mouth of Madness, because it really gets out there. It's really ridiculous. So for me personally, I'm giving this movie 2 thumbs way up. I think you should watch it. I really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of John Carpenter's work, if you're a fan of horror in general, this is an unusual and different horror movie. It's not your typical slasher movie. It's not your typical horror flick. It is something different. That's what I really liked about it. That's what I appreciated about it. It's also nice to watch a horror movie that keeps around the 90-minute mark, and that's what this did. And I felt it told a complete and whole story in 90 minutes. There's not really much footage that's wasted in this flick. Now that I've given you the grade of it, I will give you a little bit of a spoiler of the end of the movie, and that's why this movie works so quickly for me. So if you don't want to know the end of this movie, then go ahead and you can turn this video off now. I gave you the 2 thumbs up. I really like this movie. So you've been warned. Now, the thing that I really enjoyed and appreciated about this movie is the end of it. So at the end of this whole movie, what basically it boils down to is they meet up with Sutter Kane in this quote-unquote fictional town of Hobbs End, and he explains to them the more and more people in the real world are reading his stories and believing in these monsters and these creatures, it's garnered back some old ancient race of monsters that are going to come and take over the world, and that's basically what happens. So what he does is he kind of rips open his face as this portal to take the character of Sam Neill, or to take Sam Neill's character John Trent back into the real world so he can deliver this manuscript and hopefully stop this whole thing from happening. What happens is that when he wakes up in the present day and, he tells, he's finishing his story with that doctor, the doctor brushes off his bullshit and he leaves, and then he wakes up the next day after this crazy attack. And so the end of the movie is a very post-apocalyptic thing where he's walking around this city and everybody's looking around like everybody's dead, and it's one of those kind of things. So the end of the film is he walks into a theater that's playing the movie In the Mouth of Madness, starring his character, and he sits down and he starts laughing and he starts crying because he realizes that he's just a character in this guy's story. I thought this was a fascinating ending for a movie. Now I can see why this movie bombed in the box office in 1995, because it's such a weird and out there horror movie, and it probably didn't garnish a lot of attention from the mass audiences out there. So honestly, I highly recommend this movie. I really liked it. I think it's good. I think it's good horror. I think it's done right. John Carpenter does an excellent job directing, as always, and it even has your typical John Carpenter score. One thing that really makes John Carpenter interesting as a director is he doesn't always direct, he also writes, but he also produces his own music for his movies. And you think, obviously, everybody remembers the theme from Halloween, but he also did music for The Thing, The Fog, Christine, and it's no different here in The Mouth of Madness. He does the theme for this. Excellent music throughout the whole movie too. So again, to reiterate, 2 thumbs way up. I really enjoyed it. Anyways, guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.